Welcome to episode 4 of Auction Watch, the show where we deep dive into some forthcoming properties coming up for sale at auction. As always, I'm joined by my fellow property entrepreneurs, Piotr Rusinek, Jay Howard, and Rod Turner. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and smash that bell icon. We put out new content every week. It's all dedicated to keeping you on top of your property investment game. In today's episode, we're looking at 4 auction lots. First up is a beautiful shop and uppers down in Brighton. The shop is a Greggs, but the upper parts are, quite frankly, the best residential above commercial I've ever seen, so stay tuned for that one. Second, we're looking at a shop in Bromley let to a solicitor's practice. Then we're off to Windsor for a detached restaurant building, which I understand is the Queen's favourite Indian restaurant. And finally, we're looking at a landlocked set of 2 holiday cottages. Is that a deal? So that's all coming up in this show, so let's get on with it.
So this is lot 4 of the Acuitus auction. It is 51 Western Road and 25 Clarence Square in Brighton. This is probably a bit of an opposite to the last one in that it's a pretty high value area. So on the ground floor, it's on one side of the building, it's a high street, and on the other side of the building, it's quite a pretty garden square, really nice residential road. So quite an interesting building there. Good looking building. It's rented out to Greggs PLC on the ground floor for I think 39,000. It's up in 2026, I think. So that's a good one. And then on the first and second floor, it's got a 2-bed maisonette rented for 15 grand on an AST. And on the second floor, it's also got a studio apartment rented for 9,300. So total income is just under 64 grand. And the guide price, I think, is 975. So yeah, I think this is a really interesting one because you've got a bit of a mixed income coming in. So Greggs PLC, obviously, although I know they're shutting a few shops and cutting some jobs like a lot of these retailers are at the moment, it's still in demand. It's still a solid covenant. It is let directly to the big company. So again, it's not one of these small subsidiaries. And then we've also got the income from the residential. Now, in this area, small residential flats, studio flats, and 1 and 2 beds are going for about £500 to £550 per square foot. So immediately there, you know there's some decent value. There's also an opportunity to develop the building. The building is sandwiched in between some much taller bigger buildings there at the back on the residential, so there's certainly opportunity to increase the footprint of the residential on the uppers. And when you when they have a capital value of sort of £500 per square metre, and the cost of converting that is certainly not going to be £500 per square foot. The cost of converting that is not going to be probably even half of that. So you are looking at some decent uplift there. Not to mention the fact that this is on guide price currently just under a 7% yield in a pretty high value area. So yeah. I like it. I think there's, like I said, it's yielding well as it is, and it's got opportunity for uplift, which seems a bit of a no-brainer, really. My only concerns would be now this is where kind of auctions slightly annoy me, because it talks about options determined not to exercise. Now, it doesn't say what that is, what was in the lease to exercise. Was it a break? Or
it's a break clause.
10 years, because that's quite different. Because if it's an option to break, then that's fantastic, because it shows that they've had an opportunity during COVID to break the tenancy when they are cutting some of their business on various stores around the UK. So if it is a case that that's a break, then brilliant, because it shows that they're keen to stay on longer. They've already been there for 15 years. If it, however, is an option to increase by another 10 years or something like that, then obviously that would be less beneficial. So it would be key. I would just want to double check that. I assume it's going to be a break clause, not exercise, but I just want to double check that that is the case. And yeah, the flats have separate entrances from the residential street behind, which is a really, really pretty kind of square. So yeah, I like it.
Yeah, brilliant. And it definitely, this is the nicest rear of the commercial property you could ever get.
Yeah, it reminds me of kind of a Chelsea Square or something like that, doesn't it? Lovely buildings, a nice green square, separate entrances. Yeah.
Are those flats actually above the commercial? Is there a difference in height of the ground?
I think, Ranjan, it's on a slight hill. I think the rear of the property is lower down. The ground floor is lower down than the high street on the other side, is what it looks like. But again, I think that's you probably need to double check that.
I mean, this is the best flats above commercial I've ever seen. I'm not sure about the redevelopment or adding extra floors proposition, because the Clarence Square side just looks as though it's got conservation area written all over it.
I'm sure it does, but that wouldn't put me off increasing the height on there, especially looking at the buildings either side. It's for those of you who can't see the pictures, it's 3 sort of terrace stucco buildings sandwiched in between either side, much bigger ones, although the window levels are all at the same height, which kind of is what gives me a bit more confidence to do that, because you could quite easily extend that and keep it completely within the look and feel of.
And actually, there are 2 floors of that one.
Yeah.
There's mansard.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. I mean, Brighton are notoriously hard to deal with, sort of council on planning issues. But the thing you said about we've got some units let to Greggs, and they normally have in their lease an option to break in the first few years of it. But there's a fixed time window for exercising that option. And once that time window expires, they're on for the remainder of the lease. So that option point that they've put in there is a good thing. It's a plus point. It means they're staying there for the duration.
Yep.
Brilliant. I think there was a lot in also commercial a couple of months ago as well that one of our Auction Buyers Club members wanted to purchase, and it was a similar one with a sort of a good covenant. That one was a Costa, and then there was 4 or 5 flats. There wasn't much potential to develop. I think this provides much better potential to develop, and also it's much more central. Because you're very close to the sea, and that is going to be attractive, especially right now.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty building, isn't it, with decent income and an opportunity to add value.
Yeah. So this one is solid. Capital preservation and also capital enhancement as well. There's an opportunity there.
You do all the standard due diligence. You check if there's been planning applications before on it, and those buildings just either side to see what's happened there, to see if anything's kind of not being allowed and why, because that you would want to kind of give yourself as much chance of getting that planning through to do that. It's good that they're on ASTs as well, so I like that. You've got you're a bit more secure with Greggs down below too. Looks good to me, and like we said, it's a beautiful looking building.
My guess is 1,020,000.
I think I'd be expecting that to be going for about a 5 or 6% yield, probably closer to the 5.5. I think just under 7%. It does seem cheap, and it seems like a good buy.
I think the interesting thing about trying to estimate the value of this, because normally when the rule of thumb is if you've got flats above commercial, they will go at a discount to what those similar flats would go for on a standard residential street. But in my mind, the entrance to these flats is on a standard residential street, and you don't even have to know that you're above a Greggs. So is there a discount?
Standard residential street.
Near zero.
Yeah, I don't think you would get a discount on that. I just don't see it.
No, not with the square like this.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some properties, a studio flat, 150, and it's a pretty bad condition, and it's already sold. Another studio, 160, in a sort of block above commercials, 170. All right, this is some good value properties there.
Yeah, 200 grand, yeah.
And what was it, a 2-bedroom as well?
There's a 2-bedroom maisonette, yeah.
Okay, first and part second, and then part second floor is that one. So yeah, a 2-bedroom
Probably
flat.
the same story with most of the properties on that same stretch of that Clarence Square. In other words, they're all those flats are above shops to the front.
Russell Square, a 2-bedroom flat, 250 to 275, sold subject to contract. So I would say easily 275 for that flat.
Oh, for the 2-bed, I think it would be more, to be honest. It's a good looking building. I'd be very surprised if you're getting under sort of 300, 350.
Yeah.
That, and then the studio would be probably around 200, I'd say. But again, like I think you're looking at what's the existing income on this. You're looking at the capital values, and they're strong in the area. It's the opposite of the last lot, where capital value helps give you the buffer against any potential kind of development or value uplift in that term. So yeah, I think. Okay,
I'm reviewing my prediction upward to £1,058,033. That's 6% yield. I think 6% is fair.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Good. Okay, brilliant. Well, let's move on to the next one.
So what do you think about that Brighton deal? I thought it was not bad at all. What would you pay for it? Let us know in the comments below. And make sure you smash that like button as well.
So this is lot number 19, the Allsop commercial auction. It's a leasehold property, 999 years, at 236 High Street, Bromley, Kent. It's a shop let on a lease to Solicitors, McHugh Solicitors LLP. And they had a break option in 2021. They didn't exercise it. Their lease expires in 2026. And this is quite a popular high street with Domino's, Sainsbury's, and all sorts of good brands in there. The rent is £20,000 and the guide price is £200,000 plus. So gross yield of about 10%.
Is it freehold or
no? So this is actually a freeholder selling off the commercial property.
Okay, right.
They're creating a new lease for that commercial property and selling it off with that tenant on the ground floor.
Parking space at the back, isn't it? So there's not really any option to do any development or uplift there. It's really an income play, isn't it, on this lease?
Yeah, that was my question. Like, let's say those solicitors, they're paying the rent. They're 1 month in arrears, so they paid only 2 months, 2/3 of the last quarter's rent. They've got a payment plan in place. Normally, I wouldn't have issues with solicitors because they normally get paid most of the times because people always need solicitors. And this is London's leading progressive firms, but that's their own words basically, taken from the website. So I'm just wondering, like, what would you guys think are the secondary options with a property like that?
Not a huge. Well, it's like the rest of the high street, isn't it? It's. I don't know. The thing with stuff like this is you've got to look at what you're buying it for. Are you buying it for the income? And if so, how likely are you going to be to get that income? So you've already said they're in arrears. Why are they in arrears? Is 20 grand per annum the market rent in case they go and you've got to find someone else to go in it?
Yeah.
What do McQueen Solicitors LLP look like in terms of their finance? That sort of stuff. I mean, it's a strong, solid yield on the guide. Sort of 10% is chunky for somewhere like Bromley. So that's big, but I think that does represent kind of what's happening on the high street at the moment, where you've got no kind of options to do anything sexy with it or add value in any other way. It is really, if they leave, you've got to find someone to pull them back to rent it off you. I mean, but that's reflected in the high yield.
Yeah,
I tend to find that properties like this, which are leasehold, they tend to go, the guide does seem to be for a higher yield, and that reflects what you can do with the thing. I mean, I'd much prefer it the other way around, where you're buying the freehold and the flats were sold off on long leases, because at least, you know, after a time, the leaseholders want to extend their lease and pay some money and all this sort of stuff. But there's just very limited amount you can do with just a leasehold.
But again, Ranjan, I suppose this would, like the first lot that we discussed today, where it's a security of income play on a 4% yield. This is, I suppose, the other end of maybe the risk premium, where you might have this in your portfolio. It's not sexy, but it's giving you good cash flow while it's going on. So the 10% yield, yeah, you've got, I don't know, how long is there left? 6 years.
Five and a half years. Yeah.
You'd assume, you'd hope they're still in business and will continue to rent it after that time, and it's just a case of getting your money back from your income over time. So, yeah.
What I like about this one of the things that kind of makes me excited is there's that 5.5 years left on the lease. And I think those solicitors, if they needed to go, they would have gone by now, because they had an option to break.
Yeah.
And they didn't exercise it, and it was just now, like literally in the last few months. So there will be that for another 5 years. In 5 years, the high streets are going to look different, and it's going to be a different economic climate as well. So I would say there will be an opportunity to let this property to a much better covenant in 2026, and that could potentially even double the value of that property.
Okay.
If, let's say, if we let it to Domino's Pizza at £35,000 per annum, it's not a huge rent for 110 square meters of a property.
Yes, this is the other thing that people need to be aware of with leaseholds, is that, of course, we've had the new usage class E, which allows you to make a newsagent into a restaurant, an estate agent into whatever you like. You can repurpose these things. But that's from a planning point of view. You've also got to check whether the freeholder will allow it. And sometimes the thing to check is when the freeholder has created this long lease, whether the freeholder has restricted its usage within certain usage types. And that will trump any Class E that the council may be giving you, if that makes sense. And sometimes if he's got a residential interest in the flats above, if he's still maintaining those, then he may not want certain usage types on the ground floor, and may have prohibited the usage of certain types of uses like Domino's or whatever on the ground floor.
Makes sense, yeah. Interesting. Well, let's see what this is going to go for. Any guesses?
240.
It should in that area settle at around 7%, 7.5 maybe. Would be a good purchase price. You'd expect.
I'm with you on that, Jay. At the higher end, 7.5, I think, because it's leasehold.
Okay, so 250 is your guess, say.
At the absolute maximum, yeah.
266 is a 7.5% yield.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Okay. Good. Tell us all about it, Ranjan.
Ah, yes. We're down to Windsor, to the Queen's favourite Indian restaurant. I have to declare a small interest in this. I have eaten there. Biryani could have been better, but the lamb rogan josh was pretty mean with some naan bread. But I digress slightly. So restaurant building's a detached building, which is one of the things that I sort of like. It means that you've got a lot of flexibility to build and extend. You don't have party wall agreements or any immediate adjoining neighbours and all those sort of issues. It's entirely let to a restaurant at the moment. Now, the thing when you're looking at properties let to restaurants, particularly if they are independent restaurants, they're not national chains, it's how long have they been in situ? Now, normally for restaurants, the first couple of years are make or break. If they're going to go to the wall, they'll go to the wall within a couple of years. But this has been in situ for some time now, for a good 6 years chunk. Yes, we've had COVID and all of that, and they have taken a little bit of a rent reduction has been offered for them to cope with the issues of shutdown. But the key issue for me is, well, what was the health of that business pre-COVID? And pre-COVID, it seems to be a good business. With stuff like this, I would take a look at things like TripAdvisor and look at the Saffron restaurant. How many reviews is it getting? What are things people saying about the service and the food and the like? And it gives you an indication of, once we're out of lockdown and all of that, how good a proposition this Saffron place will be. It's rented out in its entirety to the restaurant tenant. It has an upper floor flat, which typically with these sort of restaurants, the owner will be using it as accommodation for waiters and stuff like that. But if you look at the picture, you can see that the upper flat has separate access from the side via a staircase. So that is nice. And it's one of these things where it'll go for a decent yield. The restaurant, if you just take the view that get over COVID, these people will be able to pay the rent because their business and their restaurant served okay food and it was fine before COVID, so it's likely to rebound back again. Where I'd have a problem is if the business was struggling pre-COVID, they're likely to sort of go to the wall straight after. And you've got that thing where you've got a tenant which is good in the interim. You've got a long lease, but ultimately, if it all goes belly up, you've got fantastic redevelopment potential in this site. Going up, adding another floor shouldn't be a problem for this sort of building.
Is it? And it looks like it was originally two units, wasn't it?
Yes.
Knocked through. And has it got what's out the back? Does it go all the way to the back of the?
No, this is not included.
No.
So it's only like a little part.
But is that a yard or is it parking? What's down the other side is what I want to kind of see.
Car parking.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's see if we can.
Yeah.
Let's. I don't think. No, we can't.
It's the other side that's.
But yeah, you'd.
But the other side.
What is? I think yeah, you're right, Ranjan, in terms of the redevelopment potential. I just want to check what the size of the uppers is, to see what you do there, because even potentially you could just.
The size of the uppers is no, this is Bromley. We're gonna get this in a second.
Also, one of the less attractive buildings on that road, which would hopefully lend itself to being transformed in some way.
Square feet of.
Okay. Yeah. So if you did another floor, you would be getting another unit on that.
Yeah. Yeah, easily. I think this is an interesting one, and it's great to have the insider knowledge about the Indian restaurant business in Windsor.
Good to know the Queen's favourite as well.
Well, my knowledge is very much as a consumer, as an eater of the food.
Well, sometimes that's the best way to gauge if you are looking at buying a restaurant or a pub or whatever. You go in there at busy times, you check what the service is like, how many people are in and out, what the food is like, because that's a big part of the survivability and the survivability of the business, but the serviceability of the rent, which is an important kind of element to an investment like this. So,
I mean, it's essential. It's basically 101 for dealing with any commercial property where the tenant is an independent operator.
Absolutely, yeah. I think this looks good. I like this as a building. I like the area. It's a good capital value location. The building is not the most attractive for the area, which represents a bit of an opportunity there in my mind.
Yeah, close to the centre. I think it's decent. And I was told by someone who is local to Windsor, this property has been on the market for a little while with a local agent, and it hasn't been selling. So one of the best things I always kind of recommend to people is to Google the address.
Yes,
that is magical. And there we go. Is the page for this property. Okay, and what do we say? Guide price 600. So it used to be there at 600. Now it's in the auction with a guide price between 400 to 450. So much more attractive.
So what did you think of that Indian restaurant down in Windsor? Is that a deal for you? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you're not a subscriber to this channel, then why ever not? Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you get told as soon as we upload a new video.
Good. Okay. Well, let's move to the final property. I believe it's the final property. Yes, it is. Jay, you ready?
I am ready.
This is like the most complex property we're gonna get on those things. It's like it's got complexity on complexity, and once you solve that, there's another complexity coming out.
It's the proverbial house of cards. So it's and it starts off ridiculous. So this is lot 135 in Allsop residential. It's Owl Cottage and Pheasant Cottage in Itchnor Green. In Chichester, West Sussex, so PO20 postcode. It's a pair of freehold semi-detached cottages, which are currently arranged as holiday lets. Both have off-street parking and rear gardens, so from the off, sounds good. The guide price is 300,000, which is criminally low considering like the neighbouring kind of property values are double that for one property in certain circumstances. So I had a look at this one. I looked at it originally because I don't have holiday lets. I've never looked at holiday lets. I don't do holiday lets. But I looked at this and I thought, I'm going to try and do some due diligence. And I was looking at it and I looked at booking.com and I looked at Airbnb. I looked at all of those different types of things for similar kind of buildings in the area. A building that looks very much like this is actually booked out till March.
It's a very good looking building. It's
very good looking building. Booked out to March, and they're charging £100 a night.
And 300 grand for 2 3-bed houses. Not bad.
100 grand. So now we've talked about all the sparkly, shiny bits. Let's dig beneath the earth and have a look at some of the issues. So one of the first things that you will notice is that this is being sold by fixed charge receivers. Yeah. The other thing that highlights that is in the accommodation and tenancy schedule, it is saying that one unit is currently occupied by the borough, and the second unit is subject to tenancy terms unknown, so occupied by an unknown tenancy. The key features page, which you notice at the very, very top of every Allsop entry, third point from the bottom states that it's landlocked. So you've got 2 freehold properties which are, for all intents and purposes, landlocked.
This is one other freehold title, basically. encompassing the whole.
So the freehold title, which has the two different houses on it, is surrounded by another freehold or other freehold titles, which means legally you can't get into the house unless you are trespassing on other land.
Or unless you have equitable easements or built-in rights of way. I mean, what I would imagine with something like this very much is that there is probably going to be some kind of right of way and communal share in the maintenance of that communal road. Now, when you look at the
helipad.
Oh yeah, just flying, nicely done. So, I mean, the thing here is that there are actually, from the main road to get to those cottages, it looks like there are two separate freeholds. Actually, three from memory, three separate freeholds with access rights over that. So I imagine there's a little bit of a pickle to deal with the multiple freeholders and the access and the maintenance, etc.
It does have some rights.
Yeah. It will certainly have some rights because the cottages aren't brand new, and they've been used
and they had lending on them.
Yeah.
So they'll have to pass all the due diligence with their, what do you call them? The banks. And funny enough, the proprietor is a private individual, and his pension fund. Very interesting.
Well, I guess that's why he was running them as holiday lets, because they're classified for commercial use, aren't they?
Very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I'm very new
how are you
to.
going to get him out?
Well, he's been repossessed, and actually, then if he's occupying one of the units whilst he's been repossessed, that's adverse possession, isn't it? The one to really be concerned about is the secondary unit, which is let on tenancy terms unknown.
What I'd want to know is, well, you're only going to be repossessed if you've breached your terms of the mortgage. So normally that is you haven't serviced the loan, but quite often it could be that you've breached it by running it as a holiday let when the mortgage is something else. Now, normally you wouldn't end up getting to repossession case because you do something about it, you try and refinance or something like that.
Yeah, you do remedy.
Yeah, which leads me to believe that either they've run out of money and couldn't service it for, again, like you said, nearby ones are renting for £100 a night and rented out till March, so that doesn't seem right. Or they've tried to, they've said that they've called in the loan and he hasn't been able to refinance because no one will lend on it because it's landlocked.
Oh, I see. So this seems like it's not a bank loan; it's a loan from a SIP, basically. So this is being owned by those people, Albert and Cheryl, and Albert and Cheryl borrowed money from Gerald Charles Lennington and his basically pension, the SIP, SIP fund,
which
somehow
would be the bridging terms, wouldn't it?
Yes.
When we think about it.
Yeah. So something has gone wrong between their relationship. So Gerald is now repossessing.
Well, it would be interesting to know if the occupiers are actually trustees of that pension as well. But yeah.
Legal mortgage dated, Albert.
You'd want to know what has been breached to get this process going, which I'm guessing they did it.
Demands.
I'm guessing the pension did it on a first charge with high rates. They went into penalty phases and they couldn't cash flow it. That's what I'd imagine it was, because they couldn't put it on a term mortgage, maybe because of the landlord. I'd have a guess that might be the situation. Because what I want to be knowing is if I'm going to buy it, how am I going to finance it? And if these people have had trouble financing something like this, am I going to have the same trouble? And what can I do to do that if that's the case? Or why can't they get the cash flow in order to pay it? If it's a high interest bridging loan, then that answers that one. Or is it just not in demand like the other one that Jay found that's rented out till March? It doesn't seem likely, does it? But
No, I mean, because I had to look at 3 or 4, some which had like hot tubs in the garden and things like that, or holiday let fancy schmancy stuff, and a lot of them are let, through to February, at least some through to March. There's a couple of days here and there. Minimum 3 night stays is what they're asking for. That seems to be the average. So I think your idea as to what's going on is the one that rings most feasible in my mind. I think what I would be more concerned about is probably not dealing with the issue that they face, because the chances are, if we were looking for it, we wouldn't be going down the same kind of lending. What I would be looking at is, has anyone attempted to uncover any of the surrounding issues around the access and the term landlocked? Because you'll be surprised how many of these fixed charge receivers and asset managers on behalf of banks and people like that who say these things because they don't know the full picture. They're not being given the full picture from the borrower, so they don't actually know what the technical term is, if there's any arrangements for management and maintenance of that mutual road. There may be easements in place that haven't been registered, because easements can be in place for up to 7 years without needing to be becoming registered. So there are so many things that could be in play here. And again, this may be one of those situations where having this sold at auction is probably not the best environment for it, because of those questions that would need to be answered in order to try and unlock where the value would be. Because if you can support the fact that actually there are easements to access your land, and it isn't landlocked technically because you have those easements, then that's a separate matter. But when you say landlocked, you're talking about, in order to access it, you have to be either trespassing, or there has to be some kind of ransom in order for you to access the property in general. And I think that doesn't look like that's the case.
I think it's a storm in a glass of water, basically. And
I
they
think
just
this is one of these lots where, I mean, it's clear that when people go bust, they're not often forthcoming with a lot of information. So, it may or may not be a good thing. But this is one of these ones where detective work is required, and you ain't going to get it all online. This is going to be one of those ones where you have to go down there and you have to talk to a lot of people and uncover the story as to why it's in the sale.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of potential in that property, and it's going to be interesting what's going to go for. I think we might even try bidding on this, right, Jay?
I'm encouraged to. Yes, I think there are problems there that are very, very fixable if you know how. I think even if there is landlocked, there are ways to play that to your benefit, whether that is building a helipad in one of the back gardens or whatever that may be. There are ways to deal with that. But yeah, I would. There's opportunity there. I mean, even if you buy that anywhere within 5 or 10% of that guide price, if you were to solve that landlocked issue, which for me is probably where the majority of the value is tied up, I think you're then looking at 2 cottages that, if you were to put on open market, could be easily double.
Yeah.
I've got a hunch. This is only a hunch, that solving that issue is detective work and uncovering the status quo that's already in place. Because it looks as though there's a fairly established path of access, because people have been accessing that cottage, and that has been in place for some time. And as long as you can uncover the proof of that to show it's been used as that for that time, and you can get affidavits and go through a process to get that regularized.
Yeah, that's a large part of the process to kind of get that resolved. And actually, you sometimes find these issues remain landlocked because of personality issues between the neighbouring freeholders and or the person owning that asset. So if you can go in as a fresh face and problem solve and try and approach it in a far more amicable way, you'll be surprised what you can unlock. As long as you turn up there and don't act like a complete arse, you've got a good chance.
You probably don't go in the helicopter then, Ranjan.
Probably don't turn up in the helicopter is what we're saying, yeah.